My wife secretly bought a $250, $0 house with her boss last year, then forged my signature to refinance it. And now she's claiming I owe her over $400, $0 from business investments I never knew about, and it's all headed to court. I never thought I'd be the guy sitting here, writing about how my wife, Emily, turned out to be a cheating, manipulative liar. Honestly, I thought we had a pretty good thing going. We'd been married for about 5 years. And yeah, like any couple, we had our disagreements, but I believed we were solid. That was until I started noticing little things, texts on her phone that she'd quickly hide, late nights at work that suddenly stretched into weekends, and her becoming more distant, more bitchy for no real reason. But what really set off alarms was when I found out about the house she bought behind my back, then forged my signature to refinance it. That was a shock, but what came after was even worse. Her claiming I owed her hundreds of thousands of dollars from business investments I'd never heard of, and all of it heading to court. It began about 2 months ago. I was going through some old emails just trying to clear my inbox when I noticed a strange transaction on our joint bank account. A huge transfer, $250, made to a company I didn't recognize. At first I thought maybe it was some kind of mistake or a misclick, but then I saw the property listing attached. Emily had bought a house with her boss, Mark, last year. The thing is, she never told me about it, not a word. I asked her about it one night and she brushed me off, saying it was just a business investment she was handling for a client. But I knew better. A house that expensive. Who buys that kind of property without telling their husband? That was the first blow, but it didn't stop there. A week later, I stumbled upon a forged signature on a refinancing document. Emily had forged my name to get a second mortgage on that house, siphoning out even more money. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The woman I loved, the woman I trusted, had been lying and sneaking around for months. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. The betrayal was crushing. It was. Just the money, though, that cut deep. It was the fact that she'd lied about everything, even about her relationship with Mark. And the worst part, she was so dismissive when I confronted her, acting like I was overreacting or jealous. She told me I was paranoid, that I was imagining things, that I was turning into some kind of crazy husband. But I knew better. I knew she was cheating, and I knew she was up to something much darker. The following days were a blur of anger, disbelief, and heartbreak. I started digging into her phone, her email, her bank accounts, anything I could get my hands on. I found explicit texts between her and Mark, describing their secret meetings and special nights together. I saw photos of their stolen moments, her in his office, her in his car. It was all there, laid out in black and white. The woman I thought I knew had been lying to my face for months, maybe longer. I felt like a fool, a complete idiot for not seeing it sooner. How could she do this to me? How could she pretend to be the perfect wife, the caring partner, while secretly screwing her boss and draining our savings? And then came the legal mess. She started claiming I owed her money from some business investments I'd never heard of, money she somehow managed to get court orders for, claiming I was responsible for her financial schemes. I was furious. I wanted to tear her apart, to make her pay for what she did. I remember sitting in our living room, staring at the pile of documents she'd left behind, feeling like I was drowning in betrayal. My mind kept racing, trying to piece everything together, trying to understand how she could be so cold, so calculating. The woman I married was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. I felt like I was living in a nightmare. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. All I could do was think about how she'd lied, how she'd cheated, how she'd stolen from us, and how I was supposed to move forward from this. I knew I had to do something, but I had no idea what. Part of me wanted to confront her again, to demand answers. But I also knew that whatever I said or did wouldn't change what had already happened. The trust was shattered. My entire world was falling apart. The more I dug, the more I realized how deep Emily had gone into her lies. I kept finding new pieces of the puzzle, texts, emails, receipts, that painted a picture of someone who was willing to do anything to cover her tracks. I remember sitting at the kitchen table one night, going through her phone. I wasn't proud of invading her privacy, but I was desperate for answers. That's when I saw the texts between her and Mark. They weren't just flirtatious, they were explicit. Descriptions of their sexcapades, plans to meet up again, even talk about how they'd keep everything secret. I felt like I'd been sucker punched all over again. I'd known she was cheating, but reading those messages made it real, made it personal. I confronted her the next day. I called her at work, telling her I needed to talk. When she finally came home that evening, her face was defensive, annoyed even. I showed her the messages, the bank statements, the forged signatures. Her reaction was a mix of anger and denial. She told me I was crazy, that I was reading too much into things, that Mark was just a business acquaintance, and that I was paranoid because I didn't want to face the truth. She claimed I was overreacting, that she loved me, that she'd never cheat on me, but I knew better. I could see it in her eyes, the guilt, the nervousness. She was lying, and she knew it. I felt a mixture of rage and heartbreak. How could she lie to my face like that? How could she betray me so completely? That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying everything in my head. The signs I ignored, the moments I brushed off, the times I thought she was just stressed or busy. Now I saw it all clearly. She'd been sneaking around behind my back for months. The house, the money, the affair, it all fit together like a sick puzzle. I was furious that she'd taken so much from us, not just financially but emotionally. I felt stupid for not noticing sooner, for trusting her so blindly. I started questioning everything about our marriage, about her loyalty, about myself. How did I miss all these signs? Was I just blind? Or was she better at hiding the truth than I ever imagined? I decided I needed to gather more evidence. I hired a private investigator. I didn't want to go into any legal battle blind, especially with her trying to claim I owed her hundreds of thousands. I needed proof of her affair, proof of her financial schemes, proof that she'd forged my signature. Over the next few weeks, the pie uncovered even more. She'd been meeting Mark in secret, sometimes at hotels, sometimes at his place. They had a whole affair going, and Emily was still lying about it. The financial stuff was even worse. She'd taken out loans, refinanced the house, transferred money without my knowledge. I felt like I was living in some twisted soap opera, but I knew I couldn't ignore it anymore. Meanwhile, Emily kept up her act. She acted like everything was fine, like I was imagining things. She'd call me paranoid, accuse me of distrust. She told her friends I was overreacting, that I was just jealous or insecure. But I saw right through her. I knew her game. I was furious that she thought she could keep manipulating me, keep lying, keep cheating. I started to realize I had to make some hard decisions. Part of me wanted to fight for the marriage, to fix what was broken. But another part knew that trust was gone and I'd been betrayed on every level. The house, the money, the sex, everything was a lie. I felt like I'd been hit by a freight train, and I wasn't sure if I could come back from this. One thing was clear: I couldn't stay silent. I had to face her, confront her with everything I'd found. I scheduled a meeting at her office where she thought she could keep hiding her secrets. When I arrived, I brought all the evidence, screenshots of her texts, bank statements, the pie's reports. Her face turned white when she saw them. She tried to deny everything at first, but I wasn't having it. I told her I knew about the affair, the house, the forged signatures, the lies. Her excuses were pathetic. She said she was stressed, that Mark was just a business friend, that I was overreacting because I didn't understand her ambition. But I knew she was lying. I could see through her bullshit. That moment was a turning point. I realized I had to make a choice. I could either keep fighting and try to salvage something, or I could walk away and start over. The betrayal cut so deep that I was leaning toward leaving. I couldn't trust her anymore, not with my heart or my money. But I also knew I had to be smart. I'd already lost so much, emotionally, financially, and I didn't want to get dragged into a legal nightmare with her trying to claim more. I decided I'd gather everything I could, get legal advice, and prepare for what was coming. I didn't want to be blindsided again. I felt a strange mixture of anger and relief, knowing that I finally had the truth and that I could take control of my life again. Still, the pain lingered. Betrayal like this doesn't just go away overnight. It stays with you, a scar you carry forever. After I laid everything out, evidence, proof of her affair, the forged signatures, it was like watching her fall apart in front of me. Emily's face twisted with anger and panic. She kept insisting she was doing this for us, that she was trying to build something bigger, something better. She threw out words like investment, future, security, trying to justify her actions. But to me, it just sounded like a bunch of bullshit. How could she seriously believe that cheating on me, forging my signature, and stealing money was somehow for our benefit? The more she talked, the more I saw she was just spinning lies, trying to manipulate her way out of the mess she created. I remember feeling this cold, hollow feeling inside. It was like watching my entire life crumble in slow motion. I'd always thought we had a good marriage, even with its flaws. But now I saw how naive I'd been. She'd been lying from the start, hiding her affair, hiding her money schemes, pretending to be the perfect wife while secretly screwing her boss and draining our savings. I'd trusted her with everything, our home, our future, and she'd taken it all and thrown it away. I felt betrayed, not just by her actions, but by the fact that I'd been so blind to see the truth earlier. The worst part was knowing how much she'd lied and how she kept trying to gaslight me. She told me I was overreacting, that I was just jealous, that she still loved me. But I could see through her crocodile tears. She was a master at lying, and she knew how to make herself look innocent even when she was guilty as hell. I was so angry I could barely speak. I wanted to scream at her, to shake her and tell her how much she'd hurt me. But all I did was sit back and listen, letting her spin her web of bullshit. I knew I had to be careful. I couldn't trust her anymore, not with my heart or my money. That night, I went home and started planning my next move. I knew I couldn't just walk away without protecting myself legally and financially. I contacted a lawyer I found through a friend, someone who specialized in divorce and financial fraud. I told her everything, and she advised me to gather all my evidence, document everything, and prepare for a fight. Emily's claims of owing her money from some supposed business investments were just another part of her manipulation game. I needed to stop her from draining whatever was left of our finances and make sure she couldn't hurt me anymore. The next few days were a whirlwind. I worked on consolidating all the evidence, backing up files, and making copies of every document. I also started to realize how much I'd overlooked, how many signs I'd ignored that pointed to her secret life. The late nights, the secret phone calls, the strange bank transactions. I'd always thought she was just working late or stressed, but now I saw it was all part of her cover-up. I felt a mixture of disgust and sadness. How could I have been so blind? How did I miss all these red flags? It was like a punch to the stomach every time I remembered something new. Meanwhile, Emily kept up her act. She called, send texts, trying to smooth things over, claiming she still loved me and that she'd never cheat. But I wasn't buying it. Her words didn't match her actions. I could see her desperation, her attempts to guilt-trip me into staying silent or forgiving her. But I was done being played. I told her I needed space, that I was going to see a lawyer, and that I wasn't going to let her manipulate me anymore. That was the moment I realized I had to take control of my life, whether that meant fighting for the marriage or walking away for good. I knew I couldn't stay in this toxic situation much longer. As I sat alone in my apartment, I couldn't help but reflect on everything. I'd been with Emily for so long, and I'd never imagined she'd turn out to be this person. The woman who promised me forever, who said she loved me, had been lying from the start. I felt a deep sense of loss, loss of trust, loss of the future I thought we'd have. But I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I realized I had to prioritize myself now, protect what little was left of my sanity and my finances. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Legal battles, emotional turmoil, figuring out how to rebuild after this betrayal. But I also knew one thing: I wasn't going to let her get away with it, not without consequences. And I was determined to make sure she paid for what she did in her own way. The legal process moved faster than I expected, probably because I had all my ducks in a row. My lawyer told me Emily's claims of owing her money were outright lies, fabricated to cover her tracks and buy herself some time. Still, she was persistent, trying to drag things out, claiming I owed her hundreds of thousands from business investments she never explained, never documented. But I had the evidence now, and I was ready. I filed for divorce and I made sure to include a detailed account of everything: her affair, the forged signatures, the illegal refinancing, the house she bought with her boss. I wanted her to face the consequences of her actions. She didn't take it well. Emily's initial reaction was denial. She insisted she was innocent, that I was just jealous or paranoid, that Mark was just a business partner. But when the court documents started piling up and her lies were exposed in front of a judge, her facade crumbled. She became aggressive, throwing accusations back at me, claiming I'd been controlling and abusive, trying to paint herself as the victim. But none of that mattered anymore. I had the proof and I wasn't backing down. The court hearings were intense. Emily's lawyer tried to spin her story, but the evidence was too strong. The forged signatures, the bank transfers, the explicit texts, they all proved she was lying and cheating. Throughout this process, I felt a roller coaster of emotions: anger, relief, sadness, a strange sense of empowerment. I was angry that she'd betrayed me so completely, that she'd lied and manipulated her way into a web of deceit. But I also felt relief knowing I was finally taking control of my life, fighting back against her schemes. I didn't want her to walk away scot-free, thinking she could manipulate her way out of everything. That's when I realized I had to stand my ground and protect what was left of my dignity and finances. The hardest part was seeing her try to turn things around, to make herself the victim, even in court. She claimed she was saving the marriage, that she'd do anything to fix it. But her actions told a different story. The more she tried to deny everything, the more obvious it became that she was just desperate to save herself. The court eventually ordered her to pay back the money she'd stolen, to relinquish her claims on the house, and to pay for the legal costs. The judge made it clear that her actions were fraudulent, and I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and emptiness. Justice was being served, but the damage caused ran deep. During this time, I also started the painful process of rebuilding myself. I moved out of the house we once shared, leaving behind the memories and the betrayal. I found a new apartment, a small place where I could breathe again. I cut off all contact with Emily: no more calls, no more texts. I had to focus on healing, on figuring out what life looked like without her. It wasn't easy. Every day brought new reminders of what I'd lost, of the trust that was shattered beyond repair. But I also knew I couldn't let her define me. I had to find a way to move on, to reclaim my happiness and my sense of worth. One thing I learned from all this is how dangerous lies can be, especially when they're wrapped in a pretty package of charm and promises. Emily was good at hiding her true self, at manipulating everyone around her. But secrets have a way of surfacing, and eventually, the truth always comes out. I also realized how important it is to trust your instincts. I had so many moments where I brushed off my doubts, convinced myself I was overthinking. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. Ignoring those feelings only made everything worse. If I could give any advice to someone in a similar situation, it's this: don't ignore the red flags. Gather evidence early. Protect yourself legally and emotionally before it's too late. Now, looking back, I see that this whole ordeal has changed me. I'm not the same naive guy who thought marriage was just about love and trust. I've become more cautious, more aware of how deception can lurk behind a perfect smile. I've learned that sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is to walk away from someone who has betrayed you so completely. It hurts, but it's also a form of liberation. I still have scars, sure, but I'm healing, and I'm stronger because of it. I know I'll never forget what happened, but I also know I can build a new life, one based on honesty and respect, something Emily clearly never understood. The aftermath of everything was like waking up from a nightmare I didn't fully realize I was in. The court case, the legal battles, the endless paperwork. At first, it felt like I was drowning in it all. But as the dust settled, I started to see the path forward, even if it was a long one. I moved into my new place, a small apartment that felt more like a fresh start than just a new address. I had to rebuild my life from scratch, piece by piece. The hardest part wasn't just the financial hit or the betrayal, it was the emotional toll. Trust had been broken beyond repair, and I kept asking myself how I'd let someone like Emily manipulate me for so long. One of the most surprising things was how quickly people around me reacted. Some friends were supportive, offering a shoulder, telling me I deserved better. Others, unfortunately, took her side, calling me paranoid or suggesting I was overreacting. That hurt more than anything. I'd always believed that true friends would stand by you through thick and thin, but in this case, some just didn't want to get involved or didn't want to believe their friend was capable of such betrayal. It made me realize that real loyalty is rare, and sometimes you have to rely on yourself. I learned to trust my own judgment again, to listen to my gut rather than others' opinions. I also found myself questioning everything, my marriage, my choices, my future. For a while I felt lost, unsure of what to do next, but gradually I started to focus on my own healing. I began seeing a therapist, someone who helped me process the whirlwind of emotions, anger, sadness, betrayal, and even guilt. Guilt. Yeah, I felt guilty for trusting her, for thinking I was enough. But my therapist reminded me that it wasn't my fault. Emily's actions were entirely her own. I had been blindsided, and that was on her, not me. That was a hard lesson, but an important one. One of the biggest changes was in how I approached relationships now. I became more cautious, more guarded. I didn't jump into anything new right away, but I also refused to let her betrayal define me completely. I started dating again, slowly and carefully. I realized how much I'd missed genuine connection, but I also knew I had to be patient. Trust is rebuilt slowly, and I wasn't rushing into anything. I wanted someone who was honest, who wouldn't lie or manipulate. That's when I realized I needed to get my confidence back. I started working out again, doing things I loved, reconnecting with friends I'd neglected. I needed to remind myself that I was still worth loving, even after everything. Financially, I took a huge hit, but I was determined to recover. I worked with my lawyer to ensure Emily was held accountable for the money she stole and the fraudulent actions she took. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about justice and protecting what little I had left. I got a settlement, not enough to replace what I'd lost, but enough to give me some breathing room. I also started saving again, building a new financial foundation, one that was more secure and less vulnerable to deception. It was a slow process, but I was committed to rebuilding my life, more cautious, more aware, more resilient. Looking back, I realize how much I've learned from this terrible experience. Trust isn't something you give blindly. It's something you earn, and it's fragile. I also learned that betrayal can come from the people you love most, but that doesn't mean you have to stay broken forever. There's power in walking away, in taking control of your own story. I still have scars, but they remind me of how far I've come. I know I'll never forget what Emily did, but I refuse to let her define my future. I'm slowly putting the pieces back together, stronger and wiser than ever, knowing I survived something most people wouldn't wish on their worst enemies. And honestly, I'm proud of that. Now that everything's settled, I spend a lot of time reflecting on what I went through. Looking back, I see how blind I was for so long, how I let her manipulate and lie to me without realizing it. But I also see how much strength I found in myself when I finally faced the truth. The betrayal was brutal, yes, but it forced me to confront my own vulnerabilities and learn what really matters. Trust, I've learned, isn't something you hand out blindly anymore. It's something you earn, and once broken, it's damn hard to rebuild. I don't dwell on what could have been or what I lost. Instead, I focus on what I've gained: clarity, resilience, and a renewed sense of self. I've come to understand that sometimes the end of a relationship isn't just about pain, it's about making space for something better, something honest. I've started to believe that I deserve that, and I won't settle for less again. The scars of betrayal will always be there, but they serve as reminders of my strength and my ability to survive even the darkest storms. Most importantly, I've learned to trust my instincts. If something feels wrong, I listen to that little voice inside me. No matter how convincing someone might seem, if they're hiding secrets, it will come out eventually. And when it does, it's better to face it head on than to keep pretending everything's fine. I've also realized that forgiveness isn't about forgetting or excusing what happened. It's about letting go of the anger and pain so I can move forward. That process isn't easy, and I won't lie. There are days when the hurt resurfaces. But overall, I feel lighter, freer. I want to share this story because I know there are others out there who might be going through something similar. Trust is fragile and betrayal cuts deep. But no matter how bad it gets, there's always a way out if you're willing to face the truth, protect yourself, and rebuild. I've learned that you can survive even the worst betrayals and you come out on the other side stronger. Life after betrayal isn't easy, but it's also a chance for renewal. And I've finally started to believe that, even after everything, I can find happiness again, on my own terms.